Hi everyone, welcome to Here We Are, Brattleboro's community talk show. I'm Wendy O'Connell, and our guest today is Ines Zeller Bass. Ines is a painter, a puppeteer, a teacher, and a maker of crankies, toys, and of course, puppets. She says it best herself. I am constantly creating. I have a creative spirit, which I hope a lot of people have. That's what keeps me alive and happy. One of her creations is co-founding Sandglass Theater with her husband and co-creator Eric Bass. Sandglass is a renowned theater company that joins puppets and music, actors, and visual imagery. They've toured around the world and won numerous national and international prizes. Meanwhile, Ines continues to paint, create, and explore the inner world of puppets. Hi, Ines.
Hi, Wendy.
It is great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show.
Well, we're glad you're here, and we want to hear a lot about different things, especially the things that you've been doing, sort of behind the scenes, not behind the scenes at Sandglass, but things that we don't know about in addition to puppetry. So you were born in Germany. And lived there for a number of years.
Yeah, we can say that, yes.
Okay. What was your family like?
It is a story of the war, of course, because I was born 1946. The Second World War was over 45. My mother and my sister, I wasn't born yet, had to flee from the Far East, which was then Germany, to the West, to the place where my father was from. He was, during their flight, he was at war, not at war, he was in the war. And so I was born 46, right after the war. And in spite of that, I had a really happy childhood. It was, in hindsight, I can see how much the war impacted everybody. But for me, it was not an unhappy time.
Yeah. And did you have siblings?
I have one sister who was she went through the last year. She was born 38, so when they fled, she was about 6 years old, 5, 6 years old. So she has a different body memory and whatever you have from the impact of war than I do.
Yes. And so when your parents were in flight, where did they end up?
They ended up at the place where my father was from, which is not very far from Frankfurt, called Weinheim. Beautiful little town. I went to Munich to study at the university, and then I had a different life there. Then after that, I went to the States, which was yet another very different life.
Yeah, you lived a few different lives.
Yes, I lived a few different lives.
And in the midst of all that touring, which we'll talk about as well. So you've seen a lot of the world, actually, which is kind of...
A little part of it. When I see how big the world is, I've not seen that much, but very different places than what I'm used to.
Yeah, moving into this whole area of storytelling and story listening. When you were a kid, do you remember having favorite stories?
When I look back, I realized that what I was exposed to was very traditional. I got all the Grimm fairy tales, like we still have. There were other things that there was a famous writer called Erich Kästner. I don't know, no one knows that here. He was a wonderful, wonderful writer. That was a little bit later. He was very important. Then there was Wilhelm Busch, which is another one of those writers who is so completely political, not correct anymore. Just like the fairy tales in some ways too. They were all gruesome stories, and they were all moralistic, and they showed you what not to do because they have always very bad endings. And I just want to quickly say that Mark Twain spent some time in Germany, I think at least 2 years or so, in Berlin, and he found Shock-Headed Peter, Struwwelpeter, very, very important story for me growing up. Mark Twain took it and put it in English. He translated them into English, yes. But we read these things with big glee and delight. They were gruesome, those things, but no one in the adult world was worried that we would suffer from it. And I don't think we did. I must say, having been born at the time I did, the country was pretty destroyed.
Yes, that's
and
true. Yes.
everything had to
Right.
be built up. So our entertainments in many ways were very innocent and modest.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think this, I mean, it changed then as time went on, economically, and everything went through a much better time in Germany. But so my exposure to theater also was not strong at all. I remember one puppet show as a when I was in kindergarten. I remember it was a traditional figure, the Casper, which I don't know if anybody knows. Punch and
yes,
Judy,
Punch
so
and
this
Judy,
was
yeah.
a little bit similar situation. So I saw that, and I remember that it had an impact because I still remember it. And I saw these little figures there being behind a curtain. Puppet theater also was very children-oriented.
Yeah.
And this has also changed over the years. Especially also the way we work in Sandglass Theater. Yeah, I loved stories, but what really brought me into puppetry, I think it was it has a history. It is the figure. I would create little figures almost as a small kid from things that I just saw without even knowing what I was doing.
Right.
So
So putting the 3D, it was 3D.
Yeah, there were, from whatever I found, I mean, there was not a lot of stuff around to find. I just took it from, I saw something here and I saw something there, and then would some strings or whatever, and so.
And would you play with them? Would they enact?
Not really,
things?
not really, no. They would sit in the corner and stare at me. But when I was a student at the university in Munich, my first husband and I, we joined a student-run puppet theater in Munich, which was the very first theater that opened in Munich in 1946. And it attracted a lot of fantastic artists who were not puppeteers at all. They didn't even know what puppetry was at that point, I guess. But I think the idea was, let's get together, let's do something in these really difficult times. And a puppeteer seemed to be the right size, you know, achievable. And so there were writers who later became really famous writers, people who were so skilled in so many other ways, and they got together and created that puppet theater called Kleines Spiel, Little Play. And so this kept on growing and growing, and when I and my first husband were students, we joined this puppet theater. And that was for the first time for me, oh yeah, I love this. That's where I belong. And there were marionettes, which is a very specific kind of puppet, right? It's a puppet on strings that are being animated from above. I'm not using the word manipulate because we don't like that. Then while I was doing this, and the work was all for adults. It was not a puppet theater for children. We did pieces by Bertolt Brecht. During that time, I developed somehow this interest in children's theater, so I created my own children's piece. I first worked together with another friend. She was my age. We did things together. We would just go out on the street and set up something and perform something that we came up with, and that was so much fun. That I thought, I have to have my own theater. And I took a sun umbrella that my father even gave me money for. My father, who never really would think that his kid would do puppets. From the umbrella, I hung a curtain, and then there was the space, and I created my puppets, and I created my first shows, which I performed for my children. I had 2 children at that point, for birthday parties. And then somehow it got known, and I started to do street theater. And then at the same time, I was in that puppet theater for adults. So I had these 2 things. One was puppet theater for children that I created myself, and then that puppet theater that was founded by important other people much earlier, and I became part of that too. So I had these 2 things happening at the same time. And I was so happy there.
You were
so happy. I was studying at the university. And that kind of sitting there every day and reading and writing on a chair in a room that was so unattractive. I did it, but the puppets really
Yeah.
had a much bigger pull.
And you were able to go out into the world
Absolutely.
and do that.
Yes.
You were writing your own plays?
Yes,
for the kids?
and I just want to insert that my oldest daughter, Jana, she performs these now.
Oh, she does?
She does. I handed these over, so they are over 40 years old.
Oh, that's really wonderful.
And they still work?
That's so great. And we'll get to that because you've got a legacy thing going on too with your girls. Which is pretty fabulous. As you talk about storytelling or creating a play, you also talk about listening, and doing these performances not only with the audience in mind, but as the audience as actually participating, even if it's just listening. Could you talk a little bit about that?
If you are performing for children, they are really uninhibited, I would say. Children are participators, can you say that? Participants, participators, whatever they are. They live in the story with you.
Yeah.
And they don't have inhibitions like adults have, because we are educated to sit still and watch, and which is very important too, and wait for the moment where you can come in. But children are just very alive and part of that show. So you had to be really working hard to get them quiet. And if as a puppeteer you're behind a stage and you don't actually see them and you're a solo performer, like I was, there were some interesting moments. You would get them when something really exciting was going on. You knew when the piece became boring, they immediately would become restless. But if you ask them for participation, as you just said, be very careful what you ask them. I was in a performance, there were about 80 kids, and their caretakers, that was in Germany, had decided, maybe we use that time. They are in a puppet show, we use the time and relax. Maybe they had a coffee, I don't know. But here I was with about 80 or 90 kids alone in a room that was dark. I was the only one who was lit. And the two puppets have a moment where they have to ask for help from the audience. They have to help with a rope that I threw out to pull. And that was a big learning experience. I had a rope and threw it out into the audience over my little stage and said, who would help me to pull that person out that just fell into a hole? And about 50 of the 90 kids got up, and my whole puppet theater went clunk.
Any casualties?
No,
thank God.
We put it all back up. I don't know if anybody came in from the outside, and I finished the show. But I knew from then on how to have children participate. You be very careful. In adult theater, of course, you always want everybody to participate and to be in the show. So in having done this for so many years, and also we have developed a specific training for puppetry, how we believe in puppet theater, or what the strength is, that our audience, I think, listens the best if we don't tell them everything, but if we let them have their own thoughts and feelings, important, that one. So, and also let the puppet become really its own entity, not part of the actor. You really have to separate. And in our work we are always visible, so this needs a very specific approach. How do you do that? How do you let the puppet be its own and alive when you as a puppeteer who visibly has his or her hands on this, how do you still make this possible for the audience to make this separation?
Right.
So listening is, we come back to listening, is for me being able to participate emotionally and without being told what you should think or feel.
You talking about not revealing everything in a story, allowing the audience to discover it themselves, which I think is the same thing that you're talking about. But it's a very different approach. You know, you're giving a lot of space in which the audience can become part of it. When you talk about holding the body of the puppet, so we see you, often I know you're in black, but we're very aware that you are holding the puppet and embodying, you know, invigorating the puppet. So can you talk about that relationship between you and the puppet and all of both of you to the audience, how that works?
So if I can use one of our shows, that would be the easiest for me to explain what's happening actually. We did a piece about dementia, and we had 6 patients, 6 people, sitting, these were puppets, in wheelchairs. The wheelchairs themselves were a metaphor because they were all made out of parts of baby carriages and crutches. So there was a combination of being something very young and something very old. So that's one thing that we are always looking at the metaphor. So in these seats we put the puppets. And so I had in that particular piece 2 puppets I was responsible for. The helpful thing was that they sat, so there was nobody there who had to kind of help with the feet. And that was very helpful. So you had kind of head and arm to be aware of. But they also had voices, and they had 2 different voices. And here I am as a puppeteer, but also I have a role in the piece. I'm the nurse, I'm the facilitator, whatever I am, I have a role. I'm not only that. So I have already these 2 roles. I'm a puppeteer, I'm the facilitator or the nurse or the caretaker, and I'm also this puppet and I'm that puppet. So I'm splitting my focus many ways. And this challenge I love. I don't think that's everybody's thing, but I totally buy into that. So it took us quite a while to make these absolute separations. When I'm with one puppet, I give my full focus to the puppet and stay neutral. So when I animate my puppet, I have to be careful that I don't animate myself, right? So I have to really stay but my voice has to be really in here. Now I have another one here, and that speaks. Then I shift my focus, and I have these 2 talking to each other, and I keep my focus there, and I don't do this, right? So it's a training, and it's wonderful. And then also you have to have 2 different voices, right? This puppet has to have a different voice, different range maybe, a different habit of speaking. So this is a way of staying outside their worlds. I'm in my own world, and now the audience is not confused. The audience can enter these different worlds of the puppet or me. There was another world. There were video things that had to deal with what was going on in their heads. So we created the world of the video, which were their dreams, what might go on in them. So, and we kept this really clearly apart, so the audience never was confused. Who's that now, right? So that is, for me, the easiest way to explain what you were asking. Was that clear, kind of?
It's really clear, and it's mind-blowing, you know, to think of you, because you're not bifurcating yourself, but you have an ability to be completely holy here and here and here and here, and using everything that you have, your voice and the energy that you're putting into each one of them to differentiate. But the other thing that really strikes, first of all, I can't believe you can do that. That's like multitasking.
It's great.
But you love it.
Yeah, totally love it.
So you get energized by it.
Oh, it's fabulous. And Eric did the same, and Kirk was the other puppeteer. We all were on the same page. And that is important because of our audience, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And that I'm assuming must come not only with your training and expertise, but having relationships with your other puppeteers. Certainly with Eric, you've been working for almost 50 years now, right? Yeah. But to be on the same page must be also exhilarating.
Yeah. It was a very fortunate and lucky combination, the two of us.
The other thing too, I think, that's really interesting is your reference to metaphor. You know, the way the wheelchairs are constructed. Now, these are real detailed things, you know, that the audience may or may not pick up on. But still, my feeling is that because you have created these, they speak on their own. You know, we don't need as an audience, we don't need to know that, but we sense it somehow.
Absolutely,
right?
yes. Yeah, as you said, even if they don't notice it, I think they notice somewhere.
They get it.
Maybe not
somewhere.
consciously, but it creates a unity that they feel.
Yeah, and also the idea of a video, of seeing what's going on in their minds is so creative, you know, to offer that as well. And I would think, because the subject is dementia, that it would explain something to the audience about what it's like.
Oh, absolutely. It was an important piece. We also taught workshops at the same time about how to actually how to do storytelling with people with dementia, which was a really training that we took, and then we offered that in workshops, which were very helpful to people.
I'll bet.
And also made that show more important and more, how should I say, if you just do a show, that's sometimes nice, but if you expand it and we brought it into senior homes and worked with people with dementia there and had their family come in and be part of that too.
So that would be explanatory too for the family, probably.
Absolutely, yes. They came to the show and they came to the workshops, and that was sometimes really for some of them an amazingly deep and important experience.
And were the stories themselves different?
Oh, they develop them because there's a certain way of how working, and you get the stories out of them. You work with images that everybody has, and then you write it all out, put it on a big, and then you tell everybody says something, you write it on a big piece of paper that you can see, and then every now and then you just read the story back to them. And this is actually also how we started to develop that piece.
And I bet that it's very therapeutic for the patients as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's fascinating. Another thing that you've done is crankies, which have gotten very popular over these last 5 or 10 years. Can you describe just quickly for the audience what a cranky is? And we'll show a visual.
Okay,
too.
that would be great. Yeah. So a cranky is a rolling scroll with. You crank them. This is why it's called cranky. And Peter Schumann from Bread and Puppet, he actually coined that word.
Good word.
So you do cranky, and you unroll the roll, and so the images on the scroll pass in front of you, and so you follow a story or a song or whatever. I mean, we have people do many different things. It's very, very creative, what people have come up with.
Yes.
So we had at Sandglass Theater in Putney, we had for a while musical events too, and once Anna and Elizabeth came, and Catherine Fahey, who sang, but also started to have visuals with it. And we immediately loved that, and it reminded me of my childhood. I had seen these in theaters where you have a rolling scroll as a background to something that's going on in the front, like a landscape going by, and in front an actor stands and walks where the trees go by, so he walks on the spot, but it looks like he's going along, and the stage is only small, right? So they're in the tradition of theaters that go far back to fairground events where people had so-called what is called, I can't come up with the word, but there were big pieces of paper, there were images on, and they would sing and point with a stick. This is the picture I'm talking about. And then they're saying, and then they had the next picture, and then this one. And when that was done, they turned it over, and then the next came. So they told their stories. And it was just for people that just, there was no television, there were no
Right.
movies.
Right.
That was a big fairground entertainment. Some were sung, cantadores. And then even in America, they had, what I'm saying, even in America, they had these huge rolling panoramas, they are called. And people could go on this rolling panorama down the Mississippi and take a travel along the Mississippi. And they were all hand painted, probably in oil. Someone would crank these huge things and people would just see a travel along the Mississippi, what it meant, going all the way from the south up
So
there.
interesting. That was before movies, you know.
And they have one for whaling in a museum now in Connecticut somewhere. And people could see what was whaling about.
Yeah.
So this is that tradition. And so all of a sudden this all came up and it was so non-device.
Yeah.
It was so manual.
Yes.
Everything is done manually.
Yeah.
You paint everything.
Yes.
You crank it.
Yeah.
It makes a sound. It crinkles. It cracks.
Yeah.
It
And you've
was
got a light behind it.
Sometimes you have a light.
Sometimes.
If you want shadows, you have the light behind. If you want only front light, you have only front light. If you want both, you change between front and back.
Wow.
So it has so beautiful.
Very kinesthetic.
Yes,
Yeah.
very manual.
Yeah.
And that's so much me, and this is why I love it.
Yes.
And so we do. Eric comes up with the songs. He chooses, and then we decide. Let's do that. And I come up with the visuals.
Yes. Yes.
And again, as I said before, what we try not to do, we try not to illustrate. So what you hear and what you see is not the same.
Yeah.
It has a kind of an edge to it. It's different from these two. And the people look, and then they start to think themselves and trying to get these things together. And that's the participation we are looking for.
Well, that's something it seems like you've discovered too, you and Eric, you know, and maybe other folks as well. But it's almost diverting people's attention so that all they can do is to be there, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Very clever.
Yeah. Clever, yeah.
And with kids too.
Yeah.
It's another thing that's going on, Ines. I know both you and Eric are stepping back a bit from Sandglass, and you have two lovely daughters.
Three.
You have three daughters.
I have three daughters.
That's right.
Yes,
you have three daughters.
Yes, but two of them are involved in
Sandglass.
Yeah.
So Jana and Shoshana are both stepping into different parts of Sandglass. So you've got a real kind of very wonderful family legacy going on now.
Yeah. Feel very, very lucky about this. We did not plan that it would be that way. The process brought us there, and I think process is always a very important thing if you want to achieve something. You cannot do it overnight.
Yeah.
You have to let the process happening, and if it goes happen. And if it goes that way, the way it went, I feel utterly thankful and happy and lucky that they do it. And if they are by any reason don't want to do it anymore, that's fine by me too.
Yeah.
Letting go is also an important part of life.
Yes.
But so far we don't have to let go yet.
No, they're in it. I know that Jana is continuing your school residencies that you started years ago, and summer camps.
Yes, and she has taken over my early children's shows that she does, yes.
Well, and she's using things that you started back 30 or 40 years ago. Yeah, so when we spoke earlier about the longevity of fairy tales, you know, and perhaps that's what we're going to be seeing too, is the longevity of some Sandglass productions.
Shoshana does an amazing job of spearheading. That's the word. Thank you. Spearheading the theater and also being a creative person at the same time. It's a huge task.
It is a big job.
Yeah,
a real big job. None of us realize what it's really like for the other to put on a production. There are just so many moving pieces, including fundraising and
yes,
politics and politics.
I didn't say that.
No, we're not going there for sure. In addition to Jana and Shoshana stepping in and doing more in Sandglass in general, you also have some grandchildren who are involved, right? And during the pandemic, you had kind of a family thing going on.
Yes. We have a beautiful backfield behind our Sandglass Theater. And during COVID, we were thinking of ways to stay connected to the community and to our work, and also bring in money for the theater. So we looked at the backspace and defined certain places. This is a beautiful place. We could do a little performance. Oh, there's another one. And what about over there? So we had about 6 different places, I think it was about 6, that we said, this is something will happen in each of these places. And then we were thinking, yeah, what can we do? We went back to an old show that I had been doing a long time ago, which was a circus piece. And all the puppets are there, and Jana was heavily involved in helping me build that show. So we pulled all those puppets out, and we made different stations of circus acts in the yard, in the garden. We asked 2 other friends to be part of that. And since it was COVID, we had the audience coming in little batches. They went to the one station, then to the next one, to the next one. And while they were going, a next batch could come in and visit. We wanted to have a group of people that knew each other. So we asked the family. So Jana and her entire family, her husband and the 2 boys, Django and Desi, came in. Jana's husband, Zach. Shoshana was there, and Eric and I. And then we asked Finn Campman, who is a former member of Sandglass and very big supporter. And who else was there? Chris Gerlich, who is he's a mime. And so this came together, the circus theme. And we distance each other a little bit outside, and so we developed that piece, and everybody, the entire family, was there for a whole weekend.
Oh, that's really wonderful.
Performing 3 times a day together.
Wow.
Which was,
and working together and performing together.
Yes,
wow. Who would ask for more, right?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I just want to mention your painting. Because I don't know if this is something that you've moved back to, or if you continued it all these years. You had a really nice little show at Next Stage, and it's wonderful to see your paintings out.
When Eric and I were still very much involved in the theater, when we had donations, we had to kind of thank our donors. And I started just to make little drawings, and that were all the figures are all puppets in that thing. So I started to make drawings, and then we sent these out as postcards or as cards, and thanked them, and people really liked them. And then they grew, and then they made more, and then it became its own production, up to the point where I now have a children's book.
Great.
Which I developed during COVID and self-published it, and I'm very happy about it, and who knows what's happening next.
That's wonderful. Is it available? How do people get a hold of
it? I self-published, so I have only a very limited number right now. I sell them to friends and people who are interested.
Well, so I imagine it's also on your website, though.
I don't think we have it on the website yet. I didn't do that yet.
Oh, limited edition, folks. Sign up.
But I do a lot of other things. Like when we do crankies, I also build crankies.
Yes.
In all from little one, from matchbox crankies up to bigger ones, and I offer them to the audience if they want with empty scrolls, so that they can create them themselves.
Great idea.
We developed kits, so for people to, if they're interested, we can send them a kit. So with a big, good manual that I developed. So that was the thing that I have been doing after I retired from performing.
Yeah, that's your retirement plan, is to keep creating.
And I tell you, I was really happy to retire from the children's shows. I knew it from one day to the next. I'm done with children's shows. It's yours now. I was hanging on to the adult performances for a while, and I thought, it's fine now. I can let go. And so this has been a beautiful pathway for me to stay very creative.
Yes.
And really be able to do what I really love to do.
I was going to say, focus on what you want to create now.
Yes.
You know, which is not that it's that much different than all of the work that you've done.
No, it's all related.
It's all related. It's all connected as well.
Yeah.
Well, Ines, this has been just fabulous.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you so much.
Thank
It's
you.
really fun stories. Well, everyone out there in the audience, thank you so much for being with us today. Ines and I could talk a bunch more about all of these fabulous creative things that the Zeller Bass family has done and is doing, is going to continue to do. So keep your eyes open. They have a great website. You can check there to see all the various things that are available and when all the shows are. They do a bunch of festivals. They're always doing something really wonderful and really creative. Thanks for being with us. We will see you next time.